Okay, let's see. Okay, that's good. Let's see now. Just go in here. We are we are live and ready. Okay. Well, last week we finished up David. Finally got to his death, and so um, don't know how long this is going to take, but for the foreseeable future, we're going to be dealing with Solomon. I don't think Solomon will take as long as David, but it will take a good deal of time. And there are some big things that Solomon does. The biggest, obviously, is that he's the one that gets to build the temple. And the temple that Solomon built is still considered probably the grandest of them all. Now, Herod the Great, uh, during the first century and even before the first century, started a building project on the temple of that time that Zerubbabel had rebuilt. And Zerubbabel's temple was just the basics. It was just the size and dimension and where they could use the temple again. But Herod wanted to make it grander. So the biggest thing Herod did, he had a lot of cosmetic things to the temple with all this gold overlaid stuff, but he increased the footprint. So the Temple Mount, he built retaining walls. In fact, what you see left of where the temple once stood is all the retaining walls that Herod the Great built. So it was more massive, Herod the Great, but from what people say, the one that Solomon built, there never was anything quite like it. And the expense that it would have cost was pretty incredible. So we're going to deal with Solomon. I think what I've handed you out, and once again, the thing that we have, it comes from Crockett, a guy back in the mid to late 1800s, wrote a Harmony of the Kings of Israel. And so basically, we will be in and out of Kings and Chronicles from here on out. If you want to turn your Bibles, I would turn to First Kings 2. We'll stay in that more than Chronicles, but we'll still have some overlap. I'm going to read some of it on the screen. Those that are watching it on the streaming service, either YouTube or Facebook, that's the Heritage Edition Facebook. The YouTube, if you'll search Heritage Edition Church of Christ, or at Heritage Edition, it should pop up our YouTube page. By the way, a little hint on that: if you will subscribe and like the page, it pops up then anytime there's a new video. So that way you don't have to search for it every time. It'd be easier to see. And if you ever have any comments, questions, you can leave them on the Heritage Edition site. You can leave them on the Facebook Heritage Edition site, or you can text me if you've got that information, or you can obviously I have a Facebook account as well, and I have emails with. If you want to do that, jimmypreach@gmail.com, and I'll get back to you as quickly as I can. I am going to do something Dale suggested, and I'll do that maybe this week if I have the time. Once again, we're using, as the Bibles primarily that we're using, it's a Thompson Chain reference Bible. Now, a couple of things of this, and while we are using these, they are generally a little cheaper than others. And the reason for that is Charles Thompson, I believe was his name, he did this in the late 1800s. So there's no copyright on anything he's got. So people can just take it and they can just reprint it. So it keeps the Bibles cheaper too. English Standard, I do like their premise of the way they operate. They have a little bit different copyright than most of the other translations, which also makes it cheaper. Contrary to what people may think, well, why is there always all these new translations? Well, for the most part, these new translations are out there for one thing. I saw where New American Standard has a 2020 version out that's coming out. And the only reason they're out, because to be honest, there's really not a lot of changes on them anymore. The language hasn't changed a lot in the last 20 years. It's to make money. And so these entities, NIV is owned by entity, NASB is owned by entity, ESV is owned by entity, but they have a little bit more favorable copyright law. And so it's to make money. They make money. So if you want to reproduce and use that translation, you had to pay that service. So anyway, so the English Standard is what we use. It's fairly new that someone has compiled a Thompson chain, but that's what we use. And so I will have another video soon that just kind of goes over the ins and outs of this and how we use it. But you can look it up and find where you can buy them. They're pretty widely used. I actually bought mine at a Barnes and Noble probably a couple years ago, I guess. So I think that's how long the Thompson chain ESV is out. Some of our members have a large print. They do make a large print of this, and that's handy for some. Some of them are tabbed, whatever your preference is. We particularly use the English Standard here. That's primarily what majority has kind of went to, and it's favorable for doing things like this. We don't violate, like I've got scriptures on here on the screen, and the way ESV's copyright law is, we don't violate any copyright laws by showing as much as we want. Some translations, you'd technically be violating a copyright law, and it's up to them if they want to do something about it. But in this, we don't. So we can show all the scriptures. So anyway, Solomon. So David died. Solomon was not the oldest son, was he? Now, typically when you, especially in Kings, it's the eldest son that takes the throne. That wasn't the case with, first of all, what happened to the oldest son of David? His name was Ammon, or Amnon. What happened to Amnon? He was killed. He was murdered. Yeah. Who murdered him? Well, David's second oldest son. Absalom. Absalom. So anyway, it would have really been difficult to have maintained and really, at least the ones that wanted it, was Adonijah was the oldest that wanted the throne, but that wasn't what God had decreed, and Solomon would be king, and we went through that with David. So in Crockett's book, fourth book, so it's this fourth different grouping of this, and it's the reign of Solomon. And like I say, just the outline of this, without the scriptures being done, there are, I think, 8 pages, just an outline, and very bare bones. But that just shows you how long we'll be in dealing with the reign of Solomon. And so we're going to deal with the beginning of the reign. Now, we had went through some of this in 1st and 2nd Kings. 1 Kings chapter 1 and 1 Kings chapter 2, and some. And obviously, Adonijah had tried to become king. Now, David, we went over last week, David gave Solomon a warning, and he warned him about certain individuals. And so we're going to see, how does Solomon deal with those individuals that David warned him about before he died. And I don't know, there's different thoughts, I guess, on why do you think David just didn't take care of these individuals himself?
He had a soft spot for his
closest relatives. That would account for some. Some of it, though, was he made promises to someone like Shimei, and others he'd promised them. So another thought on that. Now, do you think it will be good for Solomon to have to make action on these individuals? Or if everything had been done for him?
He needs to take responsibility.
Yes. So I think sometimes we make the mistake of doing everything. We want our children to succeed. We want them to have everything they can, but they've got to at some point do things on their own. They've got to learn, and you're always there to help them out if they need help. But the thing is, the more they do on their own, the more accomplished they're going to be, and the better they feel about themselves. So there's probably a little bit of that too. So David gave him the list of people that you might want to take care of that one. He's going to be bad if you don't take care of it, and on and on. But anyway, we see the book 4, reign of Solomon. So the beginning of Solomon's reign, and we have some parallel verses, but they all say something similar. 1 Kings chapter 2, verse 12, if you're there in your Bibles, says, "So Solomon sat on the throne of David, his father, and his kingdom was firmly established." Now, another thing that Solomon was blessed with that David was not. When David first became king, say Saul dies, was it just an easy transition? Was he firmly established in the throne? No. There was a lot of question. Even over Judah, there was some question. And ultimately, David was only king over Judah for about 7 years, a little over 7 years. And so it took a while, and there was even some civil war that was fought. So Solomon already has a great advantage in that once he was recognized as king, there was no skirmishes. There was no civil wars. There was no, I should be king or you should be king. Even Adonijah recognized that, Solomon's king. And even though he had tried to do that, he knew very quickly that Solomon would be the one that would be recognized. Some of that is also because of David, the way he was thought of, and the fact that he basically blessed the ascension. Now, 1 Chronicles 29, 23 through 25 says about the same thing. It just says, "Then Solomon sat on the throne of the Lord as king in place of David his father, and he prospered, and all Israel obeyed him. All the leaders and the mighty men, and also all the sons of King David pledged their allegiance to King Solomon. And the Lord made Solomon very great in the sight of Israel, and bestowed on him such royal majesty as had not been on any king before him in Israel." Now, Saul was the first king, but yet he had difficulties throughout his time as king. He was at war. Some people always, even from the very beginning, remember there was a couple people that talked badly of him and criticized him. And then he, contrary to the advice that Samuel always tried to give him, he rejected God's ways. For 2 Chronicles 1:1, very similar. It just says, "Solomon, the son of David, established himself in his kingdom, and the Lord his God was with him and made him exceedingly great." I think that's about all we're going to have out of Chronicles. So the rest of it is going to be in the First Kings. But we see that indeed they all say the same thing. Solomon is king. Welcome, sir.
Alex.
I have extra coffee too if you need it. Yes. He's not even waiting. Yeah, I said you're not even waiting. You're just going right to it. Okay, so the next section. Went past it. Okay. So Solomon's removal of his adversaries. And grab you one of those sheets if you want it. So, like I said, David went over some of these. One that he didn't really discuss, though, was one of his sons, Adonijah, who, remember, Joab and even Abiathar, the priest, had tried to proclaim Adonijah king. And from a standpoint, the way we look at it, Adonijah maybe should have been king based on being the oldest son left. but God had already decreed Solomon be king. David had decreed it. We saw that. So in 1 Kings chapter 2, then Adonijah, the son of Haggith, came to Bathsheba, the mother of Solomon, and she said, "Do you come peacefully?" He said, "Peacefully." Then he said, "I have something to say to you." She said, "Speak." He said, "You know that the kingdom was mine, and that all Israel fully expected me to reign. However, the kingdom has turned about and become my brother's, for it was his from the Lord." So Adonijah understood that. In one sense, sometimes you look at people in Scripture as being good or bad, but I think that would be like looking at people in the world today as good or bad. We all have the ability to do good things. We all have the ability to change our ways. And most people are neither all good or all bad. They struggle. I'd say even us in here, it's not, it is always a struggle to try to do what's always right. Sometimes it's not easy. So Adonijah, although he tried to do this, he comes and he acknowledges that God is the one that actually chose Solomon. As a result, there's no way you can fight that. And so in verse 16 says, "And now I have one request to make of you. Do not refuse me." She said to him, "Speak." And he said, "Please ask King Solomon. He will not refuse you to give Abishag, the Shunammite, as my wife." Okay. Anyone remember who Abishag, the Shunammite, was? Oh, wait, Shunammite, that's where, looking forward, a guy named Elisha, that's where he's from. He was a Shunammite. But who was, by the way, isn't that a lovely name? I don't know why more girls aren't named Abishag today.
Concubine.
Who's?
Concubine.
Concubine? Yes.
Yep.
Yeah, she became one, although she was not a concubine. Like, there was different levels of concubines. So some concubines were like wives. She was never like a wife.
She just was a foot warmer.
Okay, there you go. Yeah. She was the one when David was very old. Although I don't like that. I think that needs to be revised. It said David was very old. And we've talked about how old was David?
70.
He probably was 69, 70 because he died at 70. So he got old quick, as I say. But anyway, what happens to some people as they get old? Poor circulation. That's why it just the way it is. So when Sue was living with y'all, Steve, did she like the house a little warmer than what y'all?
Oh, yeah. She liked
Yeah.
it more.
So as we age, our circulation gets poorer, and as a result, we generally like it warmer. We don't like the cold. And so David had got to that point. His circulation wasn't good. He was, even though 70 by our standards is not that old today, he had lived a rough life, and he was old. And so they got this girl. She was a virgin, and they got her, nothing sexual about it, to basically be a foot warmer for the king, to try to keep him warm. Now, they didn't have heaters back then. Didn't have heated blankets. They could do different things, but it just wasn't as effective as just, body heat. And so that's what she was. But as a result, since she was a concubine, she's kind of in that limbo state. And so, Adonijah, you notice he goes to Mama. It says, "Can you please ask Solomon if I can have her for a wife?" And Bathsheba said, "Very well, I will speak for you to the king." So Bathsheba went to King Solomon to speak to him on behalf of Adonijah. The king rose to meet her and bowed down to her. Then he sat on his throne and had a seat brought for the king's mother, and she sat on his right. Then she said, I have one small request to make of you. Do not refuse me. And the king said to her, Make your request, my mother, for I will not refuse you. She said, Let Abishag, the Shunammite, be given to Adonijah, your brother, as a wife. King Solomon answered his mother, And why do you ask Abishag the Shunammite for Adonijah? Ask for him the kingdom also, for he's my older brother. And on his side are Abiathar, the priest, and Joab, the son of Zeruiah. Then King Solomon swore by the Lord, saying, God do so to me, and more also, if this word does not cost Adonijah his life. Now, therefore, as the Lord lives, who has established me and placed me on the throne of David, and who has made, I'm trying to find my mouse here. It's got to be somewhere. No, it's bright here. You kind of lose track of it. I need to change the color to it. There we go. Now, therefore, as the Lord lives, who has established me, in verse 24, and placed me on the throne of David, my father, and who has made me a house and promised, as he promised, Adonijah shall be put to death today. So King Solomon sent Benaiah, the son of Jehoiada, and struck him down, and he died. So what's your thoughts of that? Does that seem extreme?
Kind of shocked me. I mean, I've read it time and time again, just reading through the entire Bible quite a bit.
Yeah,
Years.
yeah. Uh-huh.
And of all the times that I just went right through it, I missed that part.
Yeah.
And I sat down, we had these sheets, and I read it, and it kind of shocked me. I thought Solomon was a peaceful guy all of his life. Or he brought peace to the nation of Israel.
He did.
He had to carry out some death to kill him.
So why do you think he did it? Now, I want to tell you this. What was David's Achilles tendon? What was his weakness? He couldn't punish those that were the closest to him, that were related to him, or that were, that setting. That is not Solomon's problem. Bathsheba. Now, another thing that you might think, okay, so he has a throne set up. Queen mothers yielded a lot of power in Bible times and even in any ancient kingdom. He has a throne set up to her, and she makes one request, very first request.
And it's for a stepson.
Yes, for a stepson, Adonijah. But Solomon didn't grant it, did he? Now, there have been two problems. If he had granted it, there was two problems here. One, people would have saw him as weak, being that he did whatever his mother said. Now, I know people that it seems like they're adults and they still do whatever. It's like they don't think of their own. And we should always honor and respect our mothers and fathers, but at some point we have to make those decisions, especially men. We make decisions on our own household, our own. We should be the spiritual leaders. So that would have been one problem. What about Adonijah? It seems all innocent. But you correctly did identify Abishag. She was whose concubine? David's. Adonijah's already the eldest son remaining, apparently. King's concubine. What controversies may have? What if people didn't like a decision that Solomon made? What people said, well, Adonijah should have been king anyway. Why don't we let Adonijah rule? Some of those things actually did plague David. So So it seemed innocent, but this is where Solomon is far superior than David on his ability to rule the kingdom and understand the process of what's going to grant you peace for future and what's going to lead to problems in the future. So David had told him, David knew this. David just didn't have the internal fortitude to do these things to people. And so, like, David would never had his own son killed, no matter how bad. He didn't even want Absalom killed. So what Solomon does. Now, it is shocking. Now, these are not the times we live under today. And so we can't use any kind of bearing on, as a Christian, we should never do. Well, no, this is not the standard that they lived under then. But needless to say, Adonijah, even though he said things quite right, he obviously had some ulterior motives. Now, what if he had not asked for Abishag as wife? I think he may have been left alone if he had done that.
Well, and he might even been left alone if he had approached Solomon.
Yes, he went to the wrong person. Yes.
Yeah. But, he's just a stepson of
Bathsheba.
Mm-hmm. And he's using Solomon's mom
to curry favor. Yes.
To create and test his.
Yes. Yes. And here's the thing. This is where he was playing checkers and Solomon's playing chess. So he probably thought, well, there's nothing bad that comes of this. She could say no, and that's fine. She could ask him, the king to say no, that's fine. She could ask him, and the king grant her favor, and then he's on with his scheme that he's got. He had no clue that this would turn out bad like it did. And so it did. But anyway, so that is one enemy that is taken care of. We'll not have to worry about Adonijah. Now, the next one we get to is Abiathar. What was Abiathar's role? What was he?
Priest.
He was priest. He was one of the high priests. Him and Zadok. Bear in mind, think back. Remember, David went to get the Ark of the Covenant. Didn't work right. Came back second time, had the Levites carry it. But who else was carrying it? Of course, they were Levites, but they're actually even more special. They also were sons of Aaron. Who were two of the people that carried the Ark of the Covenant? The only two named, by the way.
Joel.
No, it was Zadok and Abiathar, the two high priests. They were carrying the ark. They're the two that It's one of the reasons why they're not going to get Abiathar's not going to get killed, but there's something that's going to take place. So in 1 Kings 2 through 26 through 27, if you want to turn your Bibles, says, and to Abiathar, so he just had Adonijah killed. The priest, the king said, go to Anathoth, to your estate. Now, Anathoth's going to be a little bit more prominent later. Anybody remember a prominent prophet that comes from Anathoth? Happens to be a priest as well, or he could have served as priest. Didn't work out that way. And I think it was on we did a lot of studies in him. I think can't remember Sunday nights or when. Jeremiah. Remember Jeremiah? Jeremiah came from Anathoth. It wasn't very far from Jerusalem. And it apparently became kind of a place where, these priests, what age did they have to retire, basically? 50. So it kind of became a retirement community, I guess, the way you look at it for priests close to Jerusalem. But anyway, so to your estate, for you deserve death, because he had sided with Adonijah. But I will not at this time put you to death, because you carried the ark of the Lord God before David my father, and because you shared in all my father's affliction. He helped him at different times. So Solomon expelled Abiathar from being priest to the Lord, thus fulfilling the word of the Lord that he had spoken concerning the house of Eli in Shiloh. Wait a second. What is this about? Now, you could go back, and I think Abiathar, the number is 5 on the Thompson chain, but you'd have to read through a lot of things, and that'd be fine. Nothing wrong with that. But for sake of saving some time, we'll just go through those so that we'll know what's going on. So, Eli? Who was Eli?
Of the sons of Jacob.
Well, I mean, all of Israel's sons of Jacob, but who was Eli? Who was Eli? We studied through it.
Yeah.
What was Samuel the last of? He was the last what? And after Samuel, they wanted kings instead. But, well, Samuel was a prophet. There are other prophets after. What was he the last of? So before Israel was ruled by a judge. Okay, so Samuel was the last judge. Who was the judge before Samuel? And the next to last judge. Who was the judge before Samuel? A guy named Eli. What else was Eli, though? He wasn't just a judge. Remember Samuel's mother, Hannah. What happened? How did Samuel come into being? Hannah was barren. They come for sacrifice, a yearly sacrifice, to a certain person that could offer the sacrifice. Who was that high priest? It was Eli, yeah. And so anyway, then Samuel is given to Eli when he's probably about 5, and Samuel learns the ways of being a priest and lives in the with the high priest Eli. So Eli was the high priest of his age, of his time. However, he had 2 sons, Hophni and Phinehas, and they were, according to God, worthless. That's bad when God says you're worthless. Anyway, so 1 Samuel chapter 3, verses 10 through 14. Remember the young Samuel? God would speak to him. And Eli said, well, if you don't talk to him, it's God. Well, God doesn't tell Samuel good news for Eli. In verses 10 to 14, and the Lord came and stood, calling as at other times, Samuel, Samuel. And Samuel said, speak, for your servant hears. Then the Lord said to Samuel, behold, I am about to do a thing in Israel at which the 2 ears of everyone who hears it will tingle. What does that mean? The ears will tingle. Yeah, something major is about to happen. Yeah, everybody's going to be on alert. On that day, I will fulfill against Eli all that I have spoken concerning his house from beginning to end. And I declare to him that I am about to punish his house forever for the iniquity that he knew, because his sons were blaspheming God and he did not restrain them. Therefore I swear to the house of Eli that the iniquity of Eli's house shall not be atoned for by sacrifice or offering forever. Now, this is not fulfilled when Hophni and Phinehas are killed in the battle. It's fulfilled with Abiathar. And so, like I say, you can look some of these verses up in the 5 of the Thompson chain, but we'll just go there to it. There we go. In 1 Samuel 22:20 is one of the verses list. But one of the sons of Ahimelech, the son of Ahitub, named Abiathar escaped and fled after David. Now, Ahimelech was apparently a high priest. What happened to him? See, all this starts coming full circle. Well, he was the high priest that gave David Goliath's sword and what to feed the people. What did he feed them with? Showbread, yes. As a result, when Saul found that out, what happened to all these high priests or these priests? Saul killed them. However, one guy named Abiathar escaped. Yeah, this Abiathar. Now, David takes him in and says, I guarantee, you're safe with me and all this. However, David accepted blame for the fact that I, in essence, got all these priests killed by my ignorance. So did Abiathar have some deep-seated grudge? We don't really know. But that could have explained maybe why he sided with Adonijah instead of Solomon. And of course, he would have known by now probably the how the whole Bathsheba thing had happened. In 1 Samuel 14:3, this just goes back. This just puts it a little bit, including Ahijah, the son of Ahitub, Ichabod's brother. Glory is gone, Ichabod. And he was the son of Phinehas, son of Eli, the priest. So Abiathar was the descendant of Eli. God had promised that they would no longer serve as priests. Well, it's fulfilled with Solomon in this. Don't know if Solomon understood this, but it's possible. But either way, it's what God had wanted. So, as a result, Abiathar. What's your thoughts on that? Now, Abiathar would have never seen Eli, never met him. Abiathar never met Phinehas or Hophni, the worthless sons of Eli. So, in one sense, does this seem fair that he is punished for something that his ancestors did?
I wouldn't think it's fair.
No, doesn't seem fair. And if that's all it was, it really wouldn't seem fair. However, what did Abiathar deserve? Solomon said, "You deserve death. You tried to usurp the throne of Israel." So it did two things. So in one sense, Abiathar was not. So as long as Abiathar was doing what God had wanted, he was the priest. His son may have been the priest too. But as soon as he went away from doing what God wanted, then he was removed from that line that fulfilled that prophecy. So, God, when God makes a prophetic judgment, God still gives you chances to change the way, but ultimately, if you don't change the way, the prophecy becomes fulfilled. And so I think that's kind of the way it is here. Abiathar, had he continued to side with David's wishes and God's wishes at that with Solomon, it wouldn't have been him. It might have been his son. But whenever that first one went away from God's ways, they would have been removed from the priesthood. And so that's what happens to Abiathar. In one sense, Abiathar, that probably was a greater punishment than if he'd been killed. You think about it. Because although he was of the son of Aaron, and all his children would be, and their children, they would never be part of the priesthood ever again. That would be a tough one. And to know, because it was your own doing in one sense. It also was fulfilling prophecy. So, you know, uh, God, God knows and how things. Now, I'm not going to get into this because it's already almost 12, but we're going to start with next week, Joab's flight and death. Now, once again, what comes out of this is Absalom has no qualms about issuing severe punishment to those who deserve severe punishment, regardless of who or what they are. Bear in mind, Absalom and Solomon and Joab would have been cousins. Now, Joab would be much older, but Solomon was one of the youngest, if not the youngest sons of David. But Joab was, remember, David's nephew. And so, it's all family. David didn't deal with family well when they deserved punishment. What's interesting is David had no problems if it was someone that wasn't a family member, people that said, yeah, I'm the one that killed Saul and here's his, whatever. And they were killed. And another one, I killed Saul's son, that was king over Israel. And, once again, David killed them. So David didn't have this issue with others. He just had it with his own family. Solomon doesn't have this issue at all, but it is interesting because Joab again wasn't an all evil person. He had some good, but he did some despicable things that did merit his death. We'll see that. So we'll look at that next week. So any questions or comments, or I'll tell you what, I'm gonna go ahead and shut down the stream. So if y'all have anything you want to talk about.